Hello dear learner, I welcome you to the lecture 4 of week 9. And this lecture is a continuation of the earlier 3 lectures on the topic, that is the notion of ecological democracy. So before we begin, I would like you to understand the concepts or the topics which will be covered in today's lecture. First, we will understand the importance of people's role in environmental decision making. And the second, we will study about the traditional notion of democracy versus the ecological democracy. We have already studied in our previous lectures that how the traditional notion of democracy is different from ecological democracy. We need a new notion of democracy to understand or to establish all the structures or processes of ecological democracy. So we will study further the differences. And the third, and I think this is very important, we will study the Gandhian model of society. Though he never termed himself as an ecological democrat, but the model which he has given us has lots of similarities and relevance for understanding the notion of ecological democracy. So with that, we begin with the first slide, where I have discussed what is the people's role or what is the significance of people's role in the establishment of ecological democracy. So to begin with, ecological democracy emphasizes upon the centrality of people in the decision making. So there are multiple levels, that there are multiple functions of people when we are talking about ecological democracy. And the first important thing is that there should be very active participation of citizens in the process of environmental decision making. Besides that, we know that in a democratic setup, people have participated actively in various social movements, in various ecological movements, about which we have already studied in our previous lecture. For making eco-sensitive decisions, it is essential that the process of decision making extends beyond the political boundaries to cultural and ecological boundaries. Now, previously, we have been talking about the boundaries of the state or the state-centric perspective of our looking at the social, economic and political problem. But the ecological problems are not like the other social, economic and political problems. We have already discussed that they extend beyond the normal boundaries of the state, because it comprises the ecosystem. An ecosystem goes beyond the boundaries of any state. It encompasses the entire earth. So therefore, we cannot have a state-centric perspective that we have already discussed. But there is another way in which we have to understand when we are talking about moving beyond the political boundaries. And it is, we are talking about the cultural and ecological boundaries. So it is not simply going beyond the political boundary, but also it is asking for going into the other disciplines or the other areas or dimensions, like the cultural dimension, the ecological dimension is already manifest or it is already understood to be a part. But yes, we have to make an extension or expansion. So therefore, it is an expansive concept. It talks of synthesis, it talks of symbiosis, and it is also a type of a multidisciplinary studies, where it draws from sociology, it draws from political science, it draws from history, culture, and so many other branches of knowledge. Now, as I have already mentioned and discussed, in the traditional notion of democracy, all the decision making is state-centered in nature, because the state is making the decisions. Those people who are at the helm of affairs, who are in the government, or the ministers, or the political representatives of the people, they are making the decisions. And they may be sitting far off from the people for whom they are actually making the decisions. And those decisions are aimed at basically, broadly, upholding of the national interest, because we will not do anything, we will not take any decisions which goes against our national interest. Of course, national interest is the primary thing. And the second, obviously, it is the well-being of the citizens. So whatever decision the government, as a representative of the state, takes decision keeping in mind the welfare or the well-being of the citizens. So now in the ecological democracy, what we have to do, the boundaries of the state has to extend to incorporate the wider ecosystem in which it is placed. So we have to move beyond the state-centric to ecocentric or the ecosystem in which our state is placed. We have to understand that our state is only one component of the huge ecosystem of which we are just a small part. And so is the case of other states. So we have to understand our position vis-a-vis the entire ecosystem. So therefore, there is need for a broader perspective to look beyond the relation between states in international relation to relations with the ecosystem, which includes both animate and inanimate beings. So it is not only at the national level, but at the international level also, we have to redefine how we understand international relations. International relation has been considered in a very simple language as a relation or as a study of relation between various states, where states are considered as a unit of international relations. So states are our unit of study. When we are talking about the decisions at the national level, or when we are talking about the decisions at the international level, it is the state-centric perspective. But we have to move beyond that. We have to understand our global relations not simply only limited to our relationship with states, but also with our ecosystem or our own relationship with the wider ecosystem in which we are placed. And that ecosystem includes both animate and inanimate things. It includes not only human beings, but also other non-human world and even the inanimate things or the non-living things. Now, this relationship has to be based not on competition or pursuance of self-interest, but on cooperative and symbiotic relationship. Now, we know that the states in the international relation or in the international field, we know they are always competing with each other to promote their national interest. Whether it is in terms of race for armaments or whether it is the extraction of the natural resources or the search for markets. You can take any example. All these illustrates that states are always competing for various reasons with each other. So we find that the present international relation is marked by a sense of competition. Similarly, we find the same inside the national territory, where we find that the people are competing with each other for control over the scarce resources, or not only people, but also various organizations, various institutions are competing with each other. And most of them are guided by consideration of self-interest, whether it is national interest or self-interest, or pursuance of power, or acquisition of more and more wealth. So these are some of the very selfish criteria which has been motivating our various actions and decision making. But these type of values or these type of relations cannot help us in the establishment of ecological democracy. We need a different framework. A framework which is based on cooperation. So states are not simply meant to compete with each other in terms of becoming superpower or in terms of excelling in the field of technology or in the field of armaments or something other. There is something called cooperation which can help us in understanding our position in the universe vis-a-vis the natural resources or our nature and ecosystem in a much more broader and comprehensive way. Because competition fragments us. to look things in a narrow perspective. It divides us, whereas cooperation unites us. It actually helps us in seeing things in a synthetic manner, in a symbiotic manner. So therefore, we need a different perspective. We need a different viewpoint when we are trying to establish the essential features of ecological democracy. With the older viewpoint or a traditional mindset, we can never be successful in the establishment of ecological democracy. So this point is very important when we are talking about how to establish ecological democracy. Then, another important difference is the traditional notion of democracy has limited itself to periodic elections, choosing representative, formation of government, and gaining power by political leaders or parties. So it is very unfortunate. I have already discussed about this quite a number of times in previous lectures, that how the democracy has reduced itself only to conduct of elections or contesting political offices, gaining power, formation of government, etc. And political parties are up to achieving all these objectives at any cost. But we know that there is something more than that. Moreover, these elected representatives, another important phenomena which has taken place is, in a democracy, it is the people who should be more powerful, who should have the control over your government in the true sense of the term. But in reality, what has happened? In reality, the representatives who are once chosen, they acquire power and they lose all connections with the people. And they try to dominate and are placed in a hierarchical position over the common people. And this has been experienced across countries. It's not a phenomena only which is limited to one country, but it is a phenomena which is witnessed across all the countries. The elected representatives, after coming to power, they acquire so much power that they gradually start losing all connections with the citizens. Now, what is the role of the citizens? Unfortunately, the role of the citizens is reduced to only voting and not active participation in decision making. You can see the actual practices of democratic system is not at all conducive to the establishment of ecological democracy. Because here, the role of citizens has been reduced only to voting once in a certain period of time, and after that it is the government or the representative who is taking all the decisions on their behalf, with no influence or participation of citizens in the making of decisions or in influencing or transforming the decisions. Now, this is a phenomena or a development which is not considered conducive for the functioning of ecological democracy. Now, it is obvious that the ecological democracy then wants to reverse this trend. Of course, if we want to achieve a certain state of affairs, we have to adopt different means and methods. And therefore, they say that we have to make the people more powerful than the representatives or the political leaders or the government. But unfortunately, as Mahatma Gandhi has also pointed out, that with the advent of modern state, the individual is becoming almost a non-entity, a micro-unit, whereas the state is gradually becoming a giant structure, with the army, police, and so many other machineries at its hand, at its disposal, that it is acquiring a giant structure. So, we want a system where the people, they regain their lost power. They not simply talk about making active participation in politics, but also active participation in the processes of decision making. And the political leaders, even after winning the election, They will be accountable to the people, answerable to the people in the real sense of the term. So, how these are going to be established, how these are going to be implemented, these details have to be worked out. So that after winning election, until the next election is held, there is a system of accountability, or there is a system by which the common man can question and influence the policy making in a way which can really bring true result and which can really make, the changes which they want. Now, when talking about ecological democracy, Mahatma Gandhi's model of society is very relevant. Now we come to the third part, that is Gandhi's model of society, and it is very relevant. Now this structure, why I am discussing here, because it provides a very useful framework to connect individual, local with the global ecosystem in a non-hierarchical and non-violent manner. Now these two words are very important, because we cannot have a hierarchical system and then think of establishing ecological democracy. We don't need a pyramidal system. We need a something different system. And secondly, violent means cannot be used to establish ecological democracy, because violence itself is so much destructive in nature. So it cannot help in the preservation of environment. So it has to be non-violent in nature. Now I would like to quote Mahatma Gandhi, and I am quoting his words because you can understand the essence of ecological democracy when I quote his words, where each word is having very deep meaning, and we can understand that how they are relevant for establishment of ecological democracy. Now I quote, "In this structure composed of innumerable villages," in this structure means he is talking about the society which he is dreaming of, composed of innumerable villages, and there will be ever widening, never ascending circles. Life will not be a pyramid with the apex sustained by the bottom, but it will be an oceanic circle whose center will be the individual, who is never aggressive in their arrogance, but ever humble, sharing the majesty of the oceanic circle of which they are integral units. Therefore, the outermost circumference will not yield power to crush the inner circle, but will give strength to all within and derive its own strength from it. Now you can see that he is talking about multiple aspects which we have already studied in ecological democracy. First, he is giving the structure. Non-hierarchical means it is an ever widening, never ascending. It is not ascending. It is not one above other, but it is widening structure. And there are multiple circles, or there are many circles within a circle. It is also called as concentric circles. So life will not be a pyramid which apex is controlled by a small section of the population and who is sustained by the people at the bottom. It is not like that. But it will be an oceanic circle. The ocean is huge and expansive. It is not a short circle, but a huge oceanic circle at whose center will be the individual. So see, he is also talking about anthropocentric approach, but at the same time he is combining it with the ecocentric approach when he is saying that this individual is not arrogant, but he is humble. He is sharing the majesty of the oceanic circle of which they are integral units, because Gandhi is trying to stress that without being a part of that oceanic circle, an individual cannot survive. And all the majesty that he or she is enjoying is because of being part of that, circle. And the outermost circumference, since it is at the, it is at the outside or outskirt, it will not yield power to crush the inner circle, but will give strength to all within and derive its own strength from it. Just see the reciprocal and symbiotic relation between individual and the wider ecosystem in the form of an oceanic circle Mahatma Gandhi is talking about. So I think it is a beautiful understanding or picturization or a vision of an ideal society which can help us in understanding how we can achieve the ideals of eco-democracy. Now, the proponents of ecological democracy argues that political democracy without economic democracy is meaningless. And this is very obvious because democracy is not simply political democracy, where we actually limit political democracy only to casting votes and winning elections. It is something more than that. It is also economic democracy, means where all the resources in the society are, at least to an extent, it is distributed in an equitable manner amongst all sections of the society. Where the private property is not concentrated only in a small section of a population, where the inequality in terms of economic wealth or living standard is not glaring. There has to be certain minimum equitable standards. If these are not satisfied, simply having political democracy or political and civil rights will have no meaning, or it will have meaning only to a limited extent. Similarly, they argue that in place of capitalist economy and big multinational corporations controlling production, there is need for sustainable economies, where local farmers and craftsmen will be self-sufficient in their basic needs. So in place of the big capitalist industrial production, industrial units, or in place of the big MNCs who are controlling the production and market across the world, what we need more is sustainable economy, because they are needed for sustaining and for the well-being of the greater section of the society who are very poor or who do not enjoy all the resources which are enjoyed by a small minuscule section of the population at the top of the pyramid. So, what is more important is not having, high GDP only or high industrial production only. What is more needed is equitable distribution of wealth. And that can be done only by focusing on the sustainable economies which sustains, where our local farmers or local producers will be self-sufficient in their basic needs. They need not depend on seeds to be acquired from the foreign countries or from the MNCs. They can fulfill their needs of seeds and fertilizers by their own methods. So we have to develop such, self-sufficient villages, which was already there in our ancient India at a particular point of time when our villages were actually self-sufficient and our villages were enjoying a very prosperous life. So there will be cooperation instead of competition. Sharing and caring will have more value than the value of money. And in place of unbridled consumerism, there will be emphasis on contentment and limitation of wants. Of course, we need certain ideals to follow, certain values and ethics to follow. And I have already discussed about the need for cooperation. The need for sharing and caring is gradually getting lost in the present world dominated by consumerism and also materialism. We are actually losing our human values, human qualities of sharing and caring. And these two values are extremely important for protecting our environment, because plants cannot speak. Animals cannot speak for their rights. It is our responsibility to take care of the plants who cannot speak. It is our responsibility to take care of the animals and those species who cannot fight for their rights. So therefore, sharing and caring has to be given more importance to earning profit and making money. And in place of unbridled, consumerism, we have to give importance on contentment and limitation of wants. These values have already been stressed upon very effectively in our ancient Indian culture. In the scriptures, in the Vedas, if you read them, you will find that they are always talking about the importance of contentment. the importance of limiting our wants and how they are important not only for the development of individual but also for the protection of our ecology. So, with that, we come to the end of this lecture with a couple of activity questions which are based as usual on the topics which have been covered in the lecture. The first question is, what are the important points of differences between the traditional notion of democracy and ecological democracy? What are the important linkages between the Gandhian model of society and ecological democracy? Why economic democracy is needed for the ecological democracy? Hope you will be able to answer based on the studies we have made till now on ecological democracy. You will be able to answer these questions. Then, there are about 3 statements or questions which I have given to you so that you think about them and develop your own analysis or answer. The first is, think of 5 changes you can make or bring in your daily lifestyles which are ecologically sustainable. We can easily do that. We can walk instead of going by motor. We can use the buses facility instead of going by our own cars. Similarly, we can make our own initiatives in terms of preservation of water. We can feed water to the birds during the summer season. And there are multiple, or I can say infinite such activities, and one of them can be planting of trees. We can plant trees around us and help in restoring the balance of ecosystem. So I would like you to identify all those 5 changes at least which you can make in your daily lifestyle or in your practices which can contribute towards ecological development or protection. The second is, do you think that unbridled consumption has led to wastage of resources across the world? Now, various data are available. On the basis of that, you will find a lot of food and other, consumable items are getting wasted every year. It is in billions. And especially it is more so in the Western countries. When a very large segment of the population is facing food crisis and living below the poverty line, it is very heartening that so much of wastages of food and other resources are taking place. So is it in any way connected with the unbridled consumption or unlimited consumption or the tendency to consume more? So I want you to think and answer these questions. And the last is, can you suggest 2 methods by which the citizens can regain their power to influence decisions in modern democracy? So with that, I come to the end of this lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it and thank you very much.